Welcome to Metropolitan Community College's virtual programming in honor of the National Native American Heritage Month. We appreciate the continued participation of many in our audience, especially at the busy time we find ourselves during the fall term. Your microphones and chat with other audience members are turned off. Send your messages or questions for today's speaker through the chat function to moderator Barbara Velasquez. Also, watch the chat. You'll receive a link to an online evaluation toward the end of the program and other important messages today. The White House's 2022 proclamation of National Native American Heritage Month begins. We celebrate Indigenous peoples past and present and rededicate ourselves to honoring tribal sovereignty, promoting tribal self-determination, and upholding the United States' solemn trust and treaty responsibilities to tribal nations. America has not always delivered on its promise of equal dignity and respect for Native Americans. For centuries, broken treaties, dispossession of ancestral lands, and policies of assimilation and termination sought to decimate Native populations and their ways of life. But despite this painful history, Indigenous peoples, their governments, and their communities have persevered and flourished. As teachers and scholars, scientists and doctors, writers and artists, business leaders and elected officials, heroes in uniform, and so much more, Native Americans have made immeasurable contributions to our country's progress. Today, we have the honor of hearing from Gregg Deal, who weaves artistry and history to communicate the United States of America's current and past relationships across Native America. Gregg Deal, Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe, is a multidisciplinary artist, activist, and disruptor. His work is informed by his Native identity and includes exhaustive critiques of American society, politics, popular culture, and history. Through paintings, murals, performance work, filmmaking, spoken word, and more, Deal invites the viewer to confront these issues both in present and the past tense. Deal has described his work as honoring Indigenous experiences, challenging stereotypes, and pushing for accurate representations of Indigenous people in art. It is in these disruptions of stereotypes and ahistorical representations which Deal uses the term to describe his work. He has exhibited his work at notable institutions both locally, nationally, and internationally, including the Denver Art Museum, RedLine Gallery, and the Smithsonian Institution. Gregg lives currently with his wife and 5 children along the Front Range of Colorado. Please welcome Gregg Deal.
Thank you. I'll start this off by introducing myself in the tongue of my people. Hamu, nu Gregg Deal, mina nia, nu kiu itukara, nu kumu, nu naa, nu tubudu, nu numu gubuchu yarawara. I'm grateful to be here, speaking to you from the traditional homelands of the Southern Ute, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho, and I'm very, very happy to be here. There's a lot to get into and a lot to share. So I'm just going to jump into sharing screens and showing you guys some images, and we can kind of go from there. I assume you can hear me okay. I don't know. We get a lot of blank faces with the Zoom. So awesome. Let me find this. I've been married for 23 and a half years. This is me about probably 60 pounds ago, and my wife, Audrey, looks exactly the same. And we have 5 kids. We have 5 kids on purpose, which I understand is a pretty Caucasian thing to do, to plan to have children in such ways, but that's what we did. This is a perfect metaphor for my family, my youngest Holland in tears and everybody else sort of oblivious to what's going on. I always introduce my family because my family is the center to everything that I do. When I introduce myself, oftentimes say that I'm a husband and a father and an artist. sometimes an activist, always a disruptor. And I've been asked recently, like, what does that mean? And what that really means is activism is something that I reluctantly participate in just simply speaking truth. But disrupting spaces, I'm here for it, and find a lot of joy in that. I think a lot of Native people do, to be honest. I am a contemporary artist. Art is important to my home, important to my household, and has played a role in our house for, gosh, as long as I can remember, and in my life for as long as I can remember. And so what I want to do is I want to show you guys some work, and then we'll get into some more recent work that has some pretty heavy historical ties to it. But so that you get a kind of a general idea of like where I'm coming from. A fair amount of the work that I've done in the past is working on the juxtaposition between reality and the perception of our existence. We're a unique group of people because we are sort of stuck in the perception of our existence and not the reality of our existence. That Americans, and if not the rest of the world, are informed by what they see through popular media, which is not necessarily true. It's in fact oftentimes rooted in fiction. And we're entering into this exciting space of being able to assert the authority of our own identity. But there's still some work to do. This piece is called The New Normal. I made this actually during the Dakota Access Pipeline protests in 2016. And in the way that protesting and free speech was being policed through social media, that somebody who was in that space could have their face uncovered, and then they find out later that who they are and are arresting them and charging them after the fact, which is kind of some scary times. And additionally, working through the idea of like, what do we look like? And particularly in conjunction with like, what do other people think that we look like? And with that comes words like honor. In the protest conversation, honor is this sort of absurd conversation that's happening that has nothing to do with honor and has everything to do with trying to hold on to these images and to these ideas about our communities that are just simply not true. Portraits are a big part of what I do. This one's interesting to me because of the sort of the overt religious undertones, which I don't actually think are overt religious undertones, but it's interesting in a Judeo-Christian society, of which we kind of are in, that there's an immediate reaction to certain symbolism that Native people of old were just adorning themselves with these symbols, with these ideas that were just that. And sometimes they mean something, sometimes they don't. But I like the idea of bucking the immediate perspective that this is somehow a religious piece. I did put a halo on his head, which is actually not a religious statement. In old Renaissance paintings, they used to put halos around Mary during the Immaculate Conception, or during Christ, like a Christ child, occasionally an apostle or something along those lines. But it was a statement of divinity. And I've used halos in some of my works specifically because of that statement of divinity. Because in our communities, we have people that are divine in nature, that we believe hold a place of divinity. And while, colonists are coming here and immediately decide that our worth is without, that we are in fact not divine, that we maintain traditionally that we come from divine people and have divine people in our communities. So I'm trained in painting. Performance art has become a part of my practice. I had the opportunity to work with performance artist James Luna. I won a mentorship and was in Venice, Italy at the Venice Biennale with him for a couple of weeks. This sort of eye-opening and life-changing opportunity, and was able to see the power of performance as James sort of embodied it. He famously said that performance art is this incredibly important medium for Native people because it gives us power in real time. If you put a picture on the wall, people can look at it, not look at it. They can bring their understandings, their misunderstandings to the table, and walk away, and maybe they don't take anything from it. But performance art is this interesting live action art where you can change things on a dime, that you can adjust what people are seeing. And it gives us Native people within that medium power to really actually challenge the things that are around us. My very first performance art piece is a piece of American Indian on Earth, and I did it for a year between 2013 and 2014. I actually made a short film about it. It's on my website if you feel inclined. It's an interesting story about putting this together and then ultimately falling into there was a photographer I was working with, and he essentially took the story. But that not, I mean, spoiler alert. So you can check out the film. It's this interesting process. But what the actual performance piece embodies is adorning myself with store-bought, and I'm using air quotes, regalia. The headdress was made in China. A number of the different items and pieces that I'm wearing were assembled in Mexico or come from like a Boy Scout kit. And I'm wearing this, and I'm wearing it for a specific reason, to exploit the idea that Americans have no idea what they're looking at. That most Native people can look at this and be like, your headdress isn't sitting right. Like those, that chest plate is not the right type of sheen for it to actually be bone. You know, the beadwork is like pre-assembled, so nobody beaded anything. It was just about applying these different things. But that Americans don't know what they're looking at. They think they know what they're looking at. And so I did this where I went out into the public and documented it through film and photography. This photograph is not staged. This family approached me at the Sculpture Garden in Washington, D.C. on the National Mall. And this gentleman, the father, I assume, of the family, wanted to take a picture with me and wanted to point to his Cleveland Indians hat. But the entire concept of this piece is about sort of also normalizing us. The romanticism of our existence ends up playing this strange role with the way that Native people are engaged. For example, you know, if I wear this in public, there's this whole reaction to it. And I think anybody who, you know, maybe goes to a powwow doesn't want to take their regalia off and goes to Chipotle to get a burrito, you know, as they're taking a break, they have these experiences as well. But the idea that it's so romanticized, that this concept of standing in a cereal aisle trying to decide between Fruit Loops and Lucky Charms, as anyone would do, is this fantastic and just hyperbolic photograph or image. And the way people would react to it, I think, is really telling to Americans, and just what they think about Native people and how inept they are into understanding that, you know, we're here and that we exist. There's this performance piece I did in 2016 at the Smithsonian, and it was part of a large group show. And in that group show, there was a number of different artists. There's about 40 of us all together. And we were told, me and this artist, her name is Anita Yo Ali. She's a Cambodian Muslim, and she's a performance artist. And the Smithsonian was really concerned about how we were going to do this performance, because we both create work that, you know, questions everything and, you know, maybe is a little bit confrontational. And they didn't want us to speak or to interact. And we had decided we were just going to go ahead and do it. And so we had the opportunity to do this piece. I'm standing in her space, standing on a stage surrounded by about 100 American flags. If you remember, in 2016, there was a presidential candidacy going on, and the discussion about Muslims was incredibly filled with vitriol and upset. And so us standing together was this sort of beautiful moment that we decided to call Existence as Protest. It existed for 6 minutes before I was forcibly removed from the stage. The power of presence is really probably, I think, the most important aspect of performance work, and the reaction to Anita and I intersecting in her space really illustrates, I think, the power of that presence. One day we'll get together and maybe finish what we started. This is a performance piece I did in 2008 with my oldest kid, Sage. Sage recently came out as non-binary using they, them pronouns, so you'll hear me use that as I'm talking about this. In this case, Sage was about 13 years old, and I wanted to create something that was informed by something as prevalent and beautiful as powwow culture. So I'm dressed in a men's Northern traditional outfit. Sage is wearing a jingle dress, and the entire concept was about removing aspects of powwow or powwow-esque situations, and creating a viable performance piece that is informed by those things. So most powwow pieces and outfits are very colorful to amplify movement and dance. When you go to a powwow, you're informed by the music and the MC who's discussing like who's drumming, what song are they drumming, what dance is being performed, who's the name of the drum group. I mean, we're even informed by, you know, the two elders complaining about how bad the fry bread is. And so it's this sensory overload, right? And I wanted to take those things out. So in this, Sage and I are actually wearing wireless headphones. And I stripped the color out of the outfits. So our outfits are completely black. The ribbon work is black. The dress work is black on Sage's outfit. The aluminum cones were painted black. The beadwork was black. I had black on black beadwork. My auntie was helping me with it and was probably going to murder me because there's like no color. And she even asked, she's like, can we put in maybe a little silver? It's like, no, just black. In fact, we have black gloss beads and black matte beads, and that was the only variation that I would allow. But it's this idea of pulling those colors out, and even in the sunlight, we look like a silhouette, and just how incredible that is, and the role that plays. And the metaphor of like existing but not existing, being present but not being present, being visible and being invisible, and the metaphor that is to Native people in the United States. So we danced quietly. You could hear the cones on the jingle dress. You could hear the bells around my ankles, and breathing, probably a lot of breathing, but you could hear us. And Sage and I were synced together in this moment in what I called the invisible lost movement, which I think is sort of haunting and beautiful, and also complicated, because I think your average American viewer is going to look at something like this, particularly in person, and not know really what they're looking at. I do murals as well. There's the halo again. This is an 80-foot mural in downtown Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs is the second most politically conservative city in the country. So if you can imagine the sort of awesome possibilities of painting an Indigenous figure in downtown Colorado Springs, and that's what this is. Of course, denoting missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, but also the intersection of our identities. Sage is a Native person enrolled in our tribal community at Pyramid Lake in Nevada, and also a fan of punk rock. They're wearing a punk rock t-shirt, and so that intersection is something that I think is really important in our representation, and realizing that we are Native people, but we're also Native people having an American experience, and our identity becomes pretty complicated from time to time as a result of that. I have this series of work called The Others, and this is in downtown Denver, and I've reappropriated old comic book images from the 40s and 50s and have placed the Indians in positions of victory. So either they're winning a fight or they're standing strong in their statement. And I've replaced all the dialogue from these old comic book images with lyrics from punk rock songs that that make sense in terms of the Indigenous struggle. So this is from a song from The Clash that is literally called "I'm So Bored with the USA." And this is huge. I mean, it's really big. It's about 3 stories tall. And no one was more surprised than I was that they let me just put this up, and nobody questioned anything. So I don't ask questions. I'll just do it. And, you know, I find it easier to to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission most of the time. But this is what they got, and I'm pretty proud of it, if I'm honest. But presence is in the same as performance art. I think within public art, presence is so important. Native bodies in public. I don't think they need a reference. I don't think that they need to be explained. I think that we can just have our image, our people, individuals from our communities be in public spaces. And I think that is the power of this type of work. I've got textile patterns on this piece that are meant to look like neon signs. So it's also reimagining what that might look like. These thousands of year old textile images, what they might look like in a modern day, which is something you'll see in some other work. Incidentally, that's my mom, by the way. This is also in Denver. My mom hasn't even seen this, so she's coming to town this weekend. So hopefully they'll get to see it then. There's the night view. So this year I've done 3 major solo exhibitions, which has amounted to a lot of work, and there's a lot to sort of take in on it. On one of the shows, which is called The End of Silence, it is using that punk rock series, those paintings, and looking at the intersection of subcultures in America with Indigenous identities and what that ultimately looks like. These are hand drums that have been painted specifically to match some of those ideas in small ways and in big ways. The Nazi punks piece is a Dead Kennedys reference. This Machine Kills Fascists is a reference to oh my gosh, I just blanked on his name. Yeah, you can look it up. And so the wagon that's on fire also sort of is in reference to a number of different sort of punk and fusion things that I've been doing. But this entire exhibition was around this series as well, and in the way that these images, which are really old but still somehow very familiar in Americana, to somehow define what a Native person is or what a Native person looks like. There's a big mural on the back. This is about, trying to remember how tall it was. I think it was probably about 25 or 30 feet tall. But it was a Native person from, the lyrics are actually from a Black Flag song called Nervous Breakdown. He's like, I won't apologize for acting out of line. You see the way I am, you can leave anytime. And then on the left side is a Native choking out a colonist, but he's saying these lines from a Special song, old ska band. If you have a racist friend, now is the time for that friendship to end. And looking at that intersection and playing around with these ideas, with these pieces that look seemingly consumable, but have this sort of deeper understanding of where we stand as a people, what we connect with, what speaks to us, and how we sort of rise above the fray of the expectations of our identity as opposed to the reality of our identity. You'll also notice too, and this is by design, that mural on the back the natives are sharing frames with the non-natives, but the natives are always taller. They're taller than the natives that are there. And so there's these little sort of psychological things that I added in to sort of subconsciously give people the idea that these presences are huge and big and strong. This is actually from a song, a very quick song from the Minutemen. And it says, I believe when they found the body of General George A. Custer, quilled like a porcupine with Indian arrows, he didn't die with any honor, any dignity, or any valor. These are real songs, by the way. That song is called The Punchline. It's one of my favorites. I think it's a fantastic song. This is from the Descendants. They did a Bush era, George W. Bush era song in the early 2000s. We flipped our finger to the King of England. We stole our country from the Indians. With God on our side and guns on our hands, we took it for our own. A nation dedicated to liberty, justice, and equality. And the native is saying to the colonists, does it look that way to you? It does that way to me. The sickest joke I know. And these lyrics are also, by the way, not out of order. This is the order in which they're performed in the songs. Challenging stereotypes and the tropes of our existence is a big part of the work that I do, because these tropes have come to actually define who we are to non-native people, which is incredibly problematic in terms of being able to assert our identity and being able to exist in plain sight without questions and preconceived notions, and honestly, non-native people informing that we are or are not real native people. How often have we heard, you don't look like a native person, but you didn't grow up here, and your last name, doesn't sound like it's Indian, and so on and so forth. You're not that brown. That's the other one that always pops up. And these things are fed by images like this. So taking these images, reappropriating them, and putting them back out there as redefined pieces is an empowerment process. This is a brand new painting from another show, which is titled, This Is Our Land. This piece is 25 feet long and 8 feet tall. It's on 10 panels that are 4 foot by 5 foot each. And it is called Never Forget. It's using abstraction, which is something that I've been developing for the last, I'd say, probably 10 or 15 years. And I'm just now bringing to the forefront. Textile patterns are also integrated in there. There's little messages here and there. Mostly it's concentrating on that abstraction. But instead of just allowing the abstraction to sit freely on its own, I've painted over the top of it images that you can see. You might have to lean into your computer a little bit. But there are images that are painted in a matte black that literally absorbs light. So when you see it in person, in some positions, you can't tell. It looks like that there's some gobbledygook in there. But from other positions, these images will pop out. In the center point, there's sort of a eagle holding, holding shrubbery and with a banner, and it just says colonial death. I was looking at these old sort of colonial statements where it said liberty and honor, and I added more to it. So it says liberty and honor, whiteness and purity, life and death, genocide and slavery. There are some old stereotypical images, like these sort of one color illustrations that are from like the 1930s and the 1940s. On the right side, there's some triangles. You can kind of see a face in there. And it's actually the Lone Ranger and Tonto, these old illustrations from that. The title Never Forget is really specifically in reference to, it's in reference to the way that the United States, its governments, and its citizens have treated this continent's first people throughout history, and through policy, as well as in popular culture, and how frequently we're told that these things happened a long time ago and we should get over it. Never forget sounds like it might be related to 9/11. And that really is by design, because the same people that would tell us to get over it are the same people that would remind us every 9/11 to never forget. I think now more than ever, it's important not to forget the sins of the past. And as there's more representation and there's more access to ourselves through social media for our young people, which is fantastic. Representation looks so much better now than it did when I was a kid, and certainly even better than the generation before me. I think it's really important not to forget that these things existed once, that these things came from somewhere, that we're fighting a battle, with something like Reservation Dogs, which is an incredible set of representation in popular media. We can't forget all of the just difficult things that happened between first contact and then like how we had to get to those places where something like Reservation Dogs could exist in plain sight. And so that's a big part of what this is about. These are some pieces that follow that same formula. I'll let you guys look at it for a minute. I have these series of signs that I've been making. They're a little utilitarian in purpose, but they say on them, you're trespassing if you can read this, you're on Indigenous lands, or attention if you can read this, you're on Indigenous lands. Warning, surveilled, 24/7. You are in Indigenous land and you are being watched. These are actual signs that I've created that I've begun putting up everywhere I could possibly get my hands on an opportunity to put these up. They look like regular signs. They're not regular signs, obviously. I have a website, a phone number. I put in a phone number so people can actually call and air their grievances, which I think is part of the piece as well. I would just love to hear somebody so upset that these signs exist, and how dare we? And to me, this is really all part of the work. The subversive action of these works end up really being kind of incredibly powerful, because we as Native people can see them, and non-Native people can scratch their head and maybe try to figure out where this comes from. These are textile series that I actually had made into neon signs, conceptual pieces that are making fun of this constant effort of putting reappropriating or appropriating dream captures into the rearview mirrors of cars. Who are all these white people sleeping in their cars? They should be concentrating on driving, and just the humor. This is called vehicular dream catch. This is called weapons of war. You can barely see it because of the angle of the feathers, but there are eagle feathers attached to these pieces as well. This piece is called a visual blood quantum color chart. It uses the old plastic Indians from the Cowboy and Indian toy sets. Each figure has been painted to match the color that it's standing behind. The cabinet is painted white. It's a metaphor for being surrounded, and of course has some textile images on the inside of the doors there. It's adorned with bullet casings on the tops and on the bottoms, and on the bottoms it's also those bullet casings are integrated with horsehair. This piece really is about sort of the gatekeeping that happens among our people, not just among our people, but also from non-Native people, the people that would say, you know, how much Indian are you? Like, are you really a Native American? Because you don't look like a Native American. And this is sort of poking fun at that, because those figures are stereotypes. And the violence of those actions of deciding who is and who isn't a Native person based on the perception of what people think we should look like really takes a toll and continues to take a toll, and how important representation is on these things. This piece is called The Place Where Spirits Get Eaten. It's in reference to John Trudell, a quote that he once said, that where he said, "Protect your spirit because you're in the place where spirits get eaten." It's a simple piece, the simplicity of it. It's meant to embody boarding schools, and the way that something as simple as a chair was weaponized within these boarding schools. These are the chairs that children were forced to sit in, forced to cut their hair, forced to speak English, not speak their own language. They were the chairs that they were punished in, probably abused in, and how the weaponization of these chairs and ultimately the weaponization of these schools really just affected entire generations and still affect us today. That's what this piece is, and what it's meant to represent. The legs of the chairs are sharpened into points. You could kind of see it. The chair, there's a chair on the very bottom that's more towards the left side of the screen, and there's two braids coming off of the chair. My two oldest kids and myself actually cut our hair last October, a year ago, specifically for this piece. This is the second iteration of this piece. I have a few other iterations of them, and we have enough braids to be able to embody these spaces as a real statement about boarding schools and just how horrific they are. And of course, the horrific nature of those schools are really coming to light in terms of mass graves and things. The boarding school that my grandparents went to, that my mother was conceived in, has a mass grave. It's the Stewart Indian School. It's in Nevada. They found a mass grave of 200 bodies next to the school. So the understanding of this is important, but the omission of these actions in American history is real. So I think pieces like this end up becoming important in trying to bring some of that stuff to light. It's another version of it. I'm getting older, so my braids are getting thinner. Mine are the black ones. My son has got this beautiful thick braid, and I'm like, man, that sucks. This is a simple version of it on the right, just the chair mounted to a wall with a single braid on it. And to the left are these Indigenous flag pieces that I created a few years ago. The top flag is essentially what if Indigenous people were represented in the American flag motif? What might it look like? It's filled with textile images. It's red on red. It's upside down, and it plays all those roles. The second one is mildly Americanized. The third one are outlines of those textile series, still within that same American flag process. But the lines are just red, so it's mostly a white flag, and it's not unlike the visual blood quantum color chart. It's a metaphor with the whiteness sort of overtaking. This is, I believe, the last piece that I'm showing. This is called "These Things Happened," and this piece is it's heavy. Last November, a friend of mine who is Eastern Shoshone had posted these corpse tags, or what's called corpse tags. I've never seen these before. I'm pretty well versed in my history and in the things that exist concerning westward expansion. These corpse tags are from the mid-1800s. They were in a place that is specifically Wyoming territory, or what they call the Wyoming territory. When I saw it, I did a Google search and found out that they're real, and found some available for sale on eBay. eBay doesn't allow you to sell like Holocaust artifacts or Nazi paraphernalia, but you can buy these literal artifacts from westward expansion. Bounty hunters were paid to murder Native people. They would turn in bodies, skins, body parts, anything that they could to represent the kill that they made so that they could get paid. This is proof that these bounty hunters were sanctioned by the United States government. I have one right here, and I can bring it really close to the screen so you can see it a little bit better. But at the top of it, it says Bureau of Indian Affairs, says Wyoming Territory, and it says corpse tag. And then there's a little spot to actually write a number. On this tail end of the corpse tag, and you can barely see it, it says property of the United States government. These were used in the elimination of Native people. So I created this piece because there's so much of this is omitted from history that I can't stand by and allow this thing to just continue to be invisible. This piece is not for sale. I would never sell this. I occasionally will go on eBay and I'll find these and I'll buy them. And so I actually have about 4 or 5 of them. The middle piece is actually handcuffs from Standing Rock Agency from around that same time. There's a little tag hanging from the middle of those handcuffs, and it's also a corpse tag, but specifically for the Standing Rock Agency. These Things Happened is, as it is the title, is really just such an egregious thing in history. I mean, how strange is it to be a Native person and to be able to buy an actual artifact that was a tool used in the elimination, not just of individual people, but of a concerted effort to eliminate Indigenous people as dictated by the United States of America. It's just absolutely incredible and upsetting and kind of amazing. So I sometimes get blamed for creating work that's heavy-handed, but this work I think is just it has turned out to be really important. Oh, there's a close-up of it. I did have a close-up of it. Looks like there's a question. I see a hand up, and I imagine it's because of this. Do you want to jump in and ask?
If we know who the name is, then maybe who's got their hand up?
Ah, I thought somebody
Anybody?
did. Well, we can
Okay.
do a Q&A in just a few minutes. I'm just about done with this aspect of it. Yeah, so these things happened. This is also on the last show that I have. It's still up in Colorado Springs right now, up through December. I wanted to finish on this piece. I actually made this piece, I'd say probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And I rehashed it and redid it. I didn't think I'd have to. At the time that I made the original piece, there was a court hearing going from a family that, a white family that had a Native child, and there was a whole Indian Child Welfare Act thing attached to it. And it became about really being upholding the Indian Child Welfare Act and how just incredibly important that was. And of course, now today, the Supreme Court is hearing an Indian Child Welfare Act case. It is diabolical what's happening and why it's happening, because there is no case, but a conservative judge allowed this to go through. The lawyer that is representing the family that that is being heard for the Supreme Court case today is the same lawyer or set of lawyers that represent Big Oil and represent Walmart and are working within and around dealing with sovereignty. And so the hearing of this Indian Child Welfare Act, which was enacted by an act of Congress in 1978, which I mean is in my lifetime, was created specifically to stop private adoptions going to non-native families. The United Nations has actually dictated the definition of genocide, and it's actually dictated by 5 very specific actions, and the United States is actually guilty of all of them. I'll read them off to you really quick. Killing members of the group is one. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group is another. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, so that's another one. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. There was a whole forced sterilization that happened in the 70s of Native women through Indian Health Services, which of course is part of Health and Human Services. And the last one is forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. It's considered to be one of the tenets of an act of genocide. And so the Indian Child Welfare Act is not just incredibly important in upholding the connection our children have to their communities and the sovereignty of our tribal communities to dictate how these things work and where they go. But from an international level, it dictates the importance of not upholding the tenets and principles of genocide. So this is what's happening right now. And the reason why I say it's diabolical is because if this case, if for any reason overturns, upsets, or otherwise disrupts the Indian Child Welfare Act, this act of Congress, it does in turn affect tribal sovereignty. And affecting tribal sovereignty is the goal, because the oil companies want to be able to enact the ability to seize land for the purposes of fracking, drilling, for oil, natural gas, all of these things that tribes are holding on to because these are our homelands. And those actions disrupt and ultimately destroy Mother Earth. And so this is a diabolical thing that is happening today, which is kind of incredible, as this is Native American Heritage Month, and this is happening right now. I know that this is a lot to take in. There's a lot to talk about, but I think if there's anything new that I've shared here, particularly if you're a non-Native person, I think it speaks to the ineptitude of the way that history is taught in our country and the way that we are regarded in terms of that history. We know who Columbus is. but oftentimes people don't know the name of the group that Columbus came into contact with. We uphold someone like Abraham Lincoln because he's the great emancipator, and omit the fact that he signed off on the largest mass hanging in United States history of 38 Dakota men, plus 2 that were hung the day after. That original number was supposed to be about 400 people, and omitting that history and why that happened and how that happened does a disservice not just to Native people, but it does a disservice to everybody, because it omits truth that can help us understand where we are, how we got here, and why those things are important. It's not just to serve us as Native people to talk about these things, but it's actually serves to provide truth that isn't important just to us, but important to you, so that you can know where you came from, how you came to be here, what happened in order for that to happen. How can we possibly move forward without truth? And it's clear that truth is under attack in this day and age. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg. There is, I have 4 pages of notes that I've taken while you are speaking. And there's just so much here. I liked when, and I'm going to kind of mix this with a question that came in, where you said that non-natives might be scratching their heads and wondering what your art is about. What we have an audience member that has asked, what kind of feedback do you get from natives on your art, or versus non-natives or other non-white groups? Do you have anything you could share?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty it's pretty accepted just across the board. I mean, obviously there's some things in here that can be or are triggering. I'm interested in truth. I think that just at its core is really what I'm pushing for, and do a lot of research and do my best to educate myself in a way that allows those things to come forward. I do a lot of print work. That last piece I showed being sort of an example of that. It's not uncommon for Native people to connect with something and to sort of claim it as their own. And I accept that as part of the process. I think that can be an important and empowering part of it. My goal is really to speak from my perspective and to speak towards things that are important to me as a Native person, and what my family is looking at or thinking about, and not speaking with a collective voice. I recognize that there's a shared experience that might show that or might look that way, but I take responsibility for what I share. And if that shared experience speaks to you, I accept that as part of the work as well. I think that's an important aspect of the work. And of course, I'm not the only Native artist doing these things. There's just a huge list of artists, and really, I think in most of our communities, artists are medicine people. There's a lot of good Native medicine people that are creating a lot of good work that is challenging not just the perceptions, but right now, as there's a discussion about critical race theory, which is not critical race theory, there's I think the importance of challenging the value of truth as we have these discussions as well.
Thank you. I definitely believe that there's going to be plenty of continued thought after we finish today. So thank you so much. There was a point where you said you lost a name, and I think that is where this comment's coming from. Was that quote from Woody Guthrie?
Yes. That is from Woody Guthrie.
Okay, excellent.
Thank
It's
you.
so cool
Thank
to
you.
have people help us out when we can't remember, right? All right, and I want to give a shout out to Lestina, who was working to help the Tired Moccasins group connect. They have some issues, and I think they're finally with us. If you're out there, everybody, we really want to thank you for joining today, and thank Levada Pilcher for her work to bring these presentations to our one of our most recognized Native elder groups in town. Did you want to introduce somebody to us?
Yeah, this is Holland, my youngest, who's homesick today and in distress. So, so Holland is with me for a moment. Do you want to say hi?
Hi.
So
No, you
she's got
don't feel well.
a little scratchy voice.
Okay, all right. And thank you for all of your work. It's we're getting comments such as that. Let me see, keep going through here. Let's see. So, and of course, immediate reaction that the Indian Child Welfare Act is currently at the Supreme Court right now. And let me see. So Cassie Rhodes Carroll has sent a poster. If you can send that through to everybody, Sydney, that would be great. She specifically had contacted me a couple days ago about preparing herself for the Supreme Court conversations. Did you have anything more you wanted to say, Greg, about that? What's happening with the Supreme Court? You said quite a bit.
Yeah, no, I think I said most everything. It's there. It's yeah, it's a lot. And I guess one of the reasons why I've always been very passionate about the Indian Child Welfare Act is because my mom was put through a private adoption, and we had to work incredibly hard to reconnect and to have access to our cultural rights and privileges. And we're incredibly lucky in being able to do that. We were able to do it quite a while ago, and we have family on our reservation, and so there's like a fantastic connection. And there's a lot of people who are on the other end of that, where they don't know who they are, they don't know where they came from. There's closed documents. Maybe they can't afford to pay a lawyer to be able to get the things that they need to get. And we as a family really lucked out in that way. And so my mom was born, obviously before the Indian Child Welfare Act, and just how important the Indian Child Welfare Act is. Not just, Canada calls it the sort of, or no, not Canada, sorry, the Australians kind of went through something similar, and incredible loss through boarding schools and through these processes where they've called them a lost generation. And that's very much what we have in the United States and in Canada. And I think it's just so incredibly important to uphold those things as we gain a little bit of ground in terms of representation, and as our communities slowly grow. We're not there. I mean, we are 1% of the population of the United States, and we oftentimes don't have authority on our own homelands to speak about a lot of the things that affect our communities. Nobody has a greater stake in what happens in America on these homelands than we do. And so that becomes incredibly important as well. So I'm passionate about that, not just because of the effects it has on families, but obviously the effect that it's going to have on tribal sovereignty if something doesn't go the way that it should go.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I know we have some audience members who were adopted out also, and I want to honor your privacy, but if anybody would like to speak out, please send me something through the chat so we can open up your microphone. We have a question. Why do non-natives insist on measuring the amount of Native American in a person's blood? Does it matter or not?
It matters a little bit, but it doesn't matter, I think, as much as people think. The how would I phrase it? The marketing around Native people, like I use that loosely, the representation of Native people that has existed for several hundred years is very specific. High cheekbones, specific color skins, specific hair lengths, specific ways to talk, dress, height, body build, like all these things have been just continually fed through popular culture and through popular media to the degree that this is the expectation. there's like 577 tribes that are federally recognized by the United States government, and several hundred more that are not recognized, that are recognized perhaps in the states that they're in, and sometimes not even that. The reality of Native people is that we are as varied as the world that we live in. My people have very round faces. We're tall. I'm about 6'4", like Samoan big, like big guys, you know, and tall women. Whereas like you might go to somewhere else like the Mohawk, who tend to have strong jaws and, you know, chiseled faces. Everything is different, and there isn't just one way to do things. But the reality is that Native people are so interwoven into the origin story of America that Americans in general feel as though they own us, that there is an ownership to that, that and an expectation that comes with it that becomes really important to that American identity. And so anything that challenges that can sometimes be really difficult for a non-Native person, because they have expectations. But it's also tied into blood myths, you know, people that believe that they have like Native family lines that maybe they don't. This is in particular below the Mason-Dixon line in, you know, in the South. It's a real thing. But it's also just in general the lack of understanding that Americans have for Native people, and that lack of context breeds misinformation. It's why Johnny Depp can play, who's a white man, can play Tonto in The Lone Ranger. It's why a pretty white girl can go to a music festival and wear a headdress and be like, oh, I think that there's Indian blood in my family line. And it's also why sports teams can use racial slurs, gross caricatures, stereotypes, and other means to represent Native people in sort of a bastardized way, and then unironically be like, we're carrying your legacy. The misinformation is significant, and it goes that deep. It really does go that deep, where people are informing what they think we should look like and how we should act. And it's just simply not that way.
Thank you. Thank you. We have comments that your art is very much adored by our audience. When I email everybody after this is over, I'll make sure that you have Gregg's website so that you can get to what he's doing and maybe decide to follow some of his work. You did mention that the oil companies would love to seize land, and this can be related to blood quantum also.
Sure.
Can you tell the audience about how the government can arrange to get land because people can't prove they're Native?
Yeah, I mean, that's like crazy complicated, because every tribe is different and has a different set of circumstances. Blood quantum is a set of measures that are frequently used to understand how much Native blood somebody has in their family line. So like my tribe, I'm half, my mom's full blood. And so my tribe actually doesn't use blood quantum specifically to measure. Like you just have to be able to, you need to know who your family is. And that's where the connection is. So it has nothing to do with genetics. It has nothing to do even with blood quantum, but you have to be connected to your family. You have to know who that is. And other tribes will use blood quantum that they're sovereign, so they get to make those decisions on their own, like who gets to and who doesn't get to be a part of their tribal community. There's a number of complicated ways that works out. And the truth is that there's a number of people who have solid claims to the communities that they belong to without the enrollment, where they are actually still connected through family lines, but they just don't meet those basic requirements. And so it's a really complicated set of issues and things. Every tribe is different. Every tribe, particularly like there's a lot of tribes in Oklahoma where Oklahoma is not their original homelands. They were placed there. Whereas like my tribe, we're on our homelands. We occupy the homelands that we have occupied for 15,000 years. And so we are in a privileged place to be able to do that. Yeah, I'm not sure I could do justice for this in a minute or two, because it's super complicated. But I mean, the long and short of it, that's sort of what's being worked out.
Thank you, thank you. And I did want to also thank you, because sometimes some of my colleagues and friends comment that women are not represented in Native art as much as the men. They notice that people always grab a male photo or whatever, and you showed us today several examples. You mentioned your mother, you mentioned your aunties, you've got your daughters there, and I know that that means a lot to some of our audience members, so thank you for keeping that in mind. We're getting close to the end here, but you did mention that Colorado Springs is the second most conservative community in the United States politically.
Yeah.
We just had an election. Do you believe that your art can impact people's political views, help to make the world more just?
I don't know. I'm not, listen, I'm arrogant, but I'm not arrogant enough to believe that like everything I do is just like suddenly changing the world. But I can give you an anecdote. The piece that I showed, the mural of Sage with the handprint over their face, that 80-foot tall mural in downtown Colorado Springs, did play a role in informing state senators about the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. And they phrased it relatives. Originally it was women, and then it was women, girls, and two-spirit. Now it's sort of evolved to relatives, because they're finding that Native men are actually missing at a greater rate than anybody else. It's just simply not talked about. So we say relatives to be more inclusive, particularly to our two-spirit relatives as well. That piece informed that issue to some state senators who went home and Googled the issue, did their research, and ultimately created bills in Colorado to provide more resources, specifically in Colorado, to help with the issues of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. I was surprised to hear that, and humbled to hear that. That is just absolutely incredible to me. But it is, I suppose, validating to know that, it can play a small role in some of these things. Oftentimes we hear things over and over and over again, talking points that become tiresome. If you're watching the news, you're hearing the same talking points over and over and over again. Art provides visual references to those talking points that mixes things up, and sometimes even makes it more palatable in understanding the issues that are being presented. And so I'd like to think that I'm participating in those places. I know work that I did on the mascot issue when I lived in Washington, D.C. did that. And so I think it can help in small ways, for sure. But I don't think you can go into it expecting, grand change based on the things that I'm creating. So if that makes sense.
That it does. And I thank you so much. We are very, very thankful to have you. Do you have any final message for our audience?
I would say get out and vote, but that happened yesterday. So no, I'm grateful to be here. I guess if there's any final notes, I think that you should always ask yourself important questions. Are you inviting Native people into your spaces? Are you talking about the true story of, Thanksgiving or Columbus? Are you thinking critically about problematic representations of Native people in popular media and beyond? And if you're struggling with any of these things, which sometimes people do, are you allowing yourself to struggle with that and ask hard questions? And are you allowing yourself a semblance of compassion, not just for the people on the receiving end of the things that we're talking about, but also compassion for yourself as you're growing and learning? Are you getting into those places in a good way, in a healthy way? because this is hard stuff, and we need to be able to regroup and have an element of self-care that allows us to also be open to things that maybe we're not aware of. I'll leave that as a final thought.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate everything you shared. And not only did you share this, but you're generously allowing us to record. So those of you who are like me and can see and feel things in a different way the second time I watch, third time, fourth time, you'll have that opportunity. Just go to mccneb.edu/native. In a couple weeks, we should have that permanent recording link up for you. So thank you so much, Mr. Gregg Deal. Thank you for showing us the love that you have for people, for your family. We enjoy having your daughter right there and seeing how things work out. I hope you feel better, honey. Audience members, it's great to have you back. And we look forward to continued learning and appreciate your lifelong learning desires. The evaluation link is in your chat. It will also be emailed to you. We appreciate your feedback. And our final slide will show you that tomorrow, because our fall term is ending very soon, will be our final Native American Heritage Month program. That does not mean that we won't continue to honor and present Native American issues throughout the rest of the academic year. But Aldo Sayone will be with us tomorrow. I know we have folks who enjoy storytelling. He's quite skilled as a storyteller. He also has worked with a very beautiful program in South Dakota that helps men who are perpetrators of domestic violence, and we're hoping to share some of that with you tomorrow. So see you tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. CST. And thank you again, Gregg. Really appreciate your being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Okay.